And to start, I'll say good evening. My name is Ernie O'Toole, and I'm a volunteer for the Chimney Rock Interpretive Association, CREA. And on behalf of CREA and the Methodist Parish here, we welcome you all to the CREA lecture series. For those of you not familiar with CREA, we support Chimney Rock National Monument west of town here with educational tours and programs, gift shop, day-to-day operations and interpretation in partnership with the United States Forest Service. This, by the way, is the National Monument out there is under the United States Forest Service, not the Park Service or anything else. I think it's one of 13 national monuments that the Forest Service runs. And many thanks to the Methodist Church for their gracious hospitality and letting us use Fellowship Hall here. And thanks to anybody that has brought goods for their food pantry. All right? And if you haven't visited the monument yet, I do encourage you to do that. And even if you have, go back. It's a fascinating, interesting place, which will give you insight into the people that lived there over 1,000 years ago, where they worked and farmed, and they were all part of the Chaco culture. And the Chaco culture was an extensive culture that thrived in the the Four Corners area from about 850 to 1150 CE. All right, now this is a revived lecture series. CREA did it years ago, and we had this went away during the pandemic, so we're trying to revive it now. And it's part of CREA's mission to tell the story of Native people's history and influence on the Four Corners. And we plan on having at least 4 a year, maybe more, maybe less, depending. And there are costs involved in this, by the way, although it's free. And we do have a donation jar, so please be sure you visit that before you go. We have 3 upcoming lectures in August. Okay, and they're going to be one each week on a Friday night, 3 consecutive weeks. And the whole series is called the Chaco Phenomenon. And the first one is going to be about Chaco Canyon itself, Chaco Canyon, its origins, people, and history. That'll be on Friday, August 15th, here in this hall here. The second one is going to be the Chaco culture itself. It was a pretty extensive culture. I reckon it's probably extended the size of the state of Indiana or bigger. And that's going to be on Friday, August 22nd. And then the third one is going to be Chimney Rock, the ultimate outlier. It's origins, people, and history. That'll be on Friday, August 29th. And like I said, they'll all be held here at Fellowship Hall, and they are free to the public. Tonight's lecture is titled Bear's Ears, Landscape of Refuge and Resistance, as per the title of Andy's book, okay? And it's presented by Dr. Andrew Gulliford, author and historian from Fort Lewis in Durango. Andy will discuss the human history of Bear's Ears National Monument. It's in southeast Utah, San Juan County, Utah. And it'll focus on the area's pre-Anglo human history, Paleo, Archaic, Basketmaker, Ancestral Puebloan, and the Chaco culture's influence there as it being the northwest frontier of the Chaco culture. Andrew Gulliford is a professor of history at Fort Lewis College in Durango, award-winning author whose books include Boomtown Blues, Colorado Oil Shale, and another Sacred Objects, Sacred Places, Preserving Tribal Traditions, and the Woolly West, Colorado's Hidden History on Sheepscape, and along with his book on Bear's Ears. So let's all welcome Andy to
Glad to be here in Pagosa. And how many Chimney Rock Interpretive Association volunteers are here? Wow. Well, thank you. Absolutely. What an interesting site. I was honored to be able to work with Florence Lister as she was writing her book, In the Shadow of the Rocks. That was published by the Durango Herald Small Press, and I worked with them for a long time. And Florence was an interesting person to work with. She definitely had opinions. She was a superb writer, and it was great. We did some tours together at Mesa Verde, and I learned a lot from her. My Bears Ears book is published by the University of Utah Press, and I am honored to say that it won the Best Book of the Year, Best History Book of the Year in the state of Utah in 2022 when it was published. And there are a lot of eager Mormon historians in Utah, and so that was quite an honor to get the best book published in Utah. And Ernie's recommendation, I'm going to talk about sort of prehistory, maybe move it up a little to the Navajos, definitely talk about pot hunting, and then I'm going to open it up to some images, and then lots of questions. Public lands are threatened right now, and so what you do is so important, and the status of public lands is important. So my next book is already at the University of Utah Press. If I could push a button and publish it tomorrow, I would, but it's going to be about a year from now. And the next book, and I'm happy to come back and talk about that, looks at all of the Bureau of Land Management national conservation lands. So 11 western states and Alaska. It's called Lonesome Landscapes, Stories from National Conservation Lands. Everybody knows national parks and the National Park Service, but nobody really understands this system, and Bears Ears is part of that system. 1.35 million acres, a national monument, but controlled by the BLM, very different from the Park Service. So the Park Service, you show up, there's a gate, there's an entrance, there's somebody there with a flat-brimmed hat, they take your money. BLM, there's multiple entrances, I can bring my dogs, very different management. And so I had a lot of fun over 4 or 5 years driving all over Arizona, Colorado, Utah, and then ended it up last summer in Alaska on a wild and scenic river with Fort Lewis College alumni. We paddled 111 miles in 6.5 days and saw no one. And was that ever interesting? In 111 miles, we found 1 beer can and 2 orange peels. Yeah, that was wilderness. That was great. So Bears Ears is an area. It is a place, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. So 1.35 million acres, proclaimed by President Obama. And the first words in the proclamation are beautiful. Quote, rising from the center of the southeastern Utah landscape and visible from every direction are twin buttes so distinctive that in each of the native languages of the region, their names is the same, Bears Ears. So you've got, Hopi, Navajo, Ute, Paiute, all these different languages, but they look at the same formation and give it the same name. So that's just fascinating to me. Bears Ears is a Antiquities Act national monument, and the Antiquities Act was signed into law by my hero, President Theodore Roosevelt, in June of 1906. Congress would never pass a law like that now. It's only a page and a half. It's like 7 paragraphs, and it has 2 really important functions. Number 1, it's the first law in the world to protect indigenous burials. No other country had a law which said if you've got a Native American burial, you can't legally dig it without a permit. That was no other country had ever done that. And then the second part of the Antiquities Act has to do with the fact that the President of the United States may take from the public domain, which is already federal land, may take areas of historic, scenic, and scientific value and set them aside as national monuments. And Teddy signed that law, had a lot of fun with it, set aside 11 national monuments. But there's one sentence in the law that's a little problematic, where he said, the law says, quote, in the smallest acreage possible. Well, what does that mean? And who decides that? So a lot of the original national monuments aren't very big, 160 acres, 320 acres. Teddy's leaving office. He leaves in 1909. There's still no decision on the Grand Canyon. And he says, well, I'm going to use the Antiquities Act. And he sets aside the National Grand Canyon National Monument. Congress couldn't agree to make it a national park at 800,000 acres. And the Arizona politicians go berserk. Sue the federal government, goes to the Supreme Court. Teddy's passed away. The Supreme Court rules and says, hey, he's the president. If he says 800,000 acres is the smallest acreage necessary, that's fine. So the Antiquities Act as a law has already been to the Supreme Court. And it's a fascinating executive privilege that every president has used except two. So that's sort of the history of the law. Now I'm going to talk about the place itself, Bears Ears, and its prehistory. So I'm going to start with Bill Leip, just passed away last week. He is the real grandfather for understanding Bears Ears archaeology. And he wrote, quote, although we will never be able to recover all the specific meanings that an artist, rock art, that an artist attempted to express on the rocks in ancient times, rock art will continue to fascinate us because it offers a direct connection, however imperfect, to the individual artist who made it and to aspects of the collective knowledge and meanings embedded in those artists' cultural worlds. Rock art is everywhere in Bears Ears. There's a section on the San Juan River, probably 4 miles, maybe 5 miles east to west, and then north to south, a couple miles, that really would qualify as a World Heritage Site. And I'll show you some images from that. So there's one panel, and there's a little dispute about this, but I think it's true. There's one piece of rock art that's one of only 5 sites in North America that's Pleistocene. It's 11,000 years old, and it's of a mammoth. And there are folks who say, well, that can't be, the sandstone's not that old. But let me tell you, a mammoth has 3 distinctive features. It's got a bifurcated trunk, so the bottom of the trunk comes down and they could pick things up. It's got this weird kind of top knot, and it has tusks. Whoever etched this on rock, that's all there. So at least they must have seen a mammoth to know that it's there. And the thing about rock art is often you have other groups coming along and doing something in the same place. And sure enough, right on top of the mammoth is a big ancient bison. And that species is extinct also. That's a bison antiquus. So I'll show you an image of that. And for you guys are all hale and hearty and fit, but if you have folks who aren't, I am stunned that the BLM, I don't know whose idea this was, but they took this fabulous set of rock art panels at Sand Island Campground, and they just did a totally perfect handicapped accessible trail. And so folks with Parkinson's disease, folks in a wheelchair can see there and get there. The best viewing time is right around the equinox, spring or fall, and then always have binoculars. And so one piece of rock art is 11,000 years. There's other that are clearly 5,000 years old. And it's just hard as a historian to think about that. 5,000 years And what does that art mean? You know, what did it mean then? So Paleo Indians in Bears Ears, as early as 13,000 to 11,000 years ago, when the climate was different. It wasn't a desert, there was lush grass, and a very different place from what it is now. The southeast Utah, they knew, had the same physical features of Comb Ridge, Cedar Mesa, deep canyons like Fish, Owl, Mule, Bullet, and Grand Gulch, and most of the same animals. But some of the tree species are gone. So the trees didn't make it out of the Pleistocene. But if you can find a pack rat nest, you can find actual, very, very ancient materials in pack rat nests. Who's been to Bluff in southeast Utah? Yeah. Who wants to go back? Yeah. Yeah. Good. This is the best map. And I got to take a deep breath to give you the title of this map. It's so long. Let me take a breath. Grand Gulch, Cedar Mesa Plateau, National Geographic, Trails Illustrated, waterproof, foldable topographic map. I did it. This is the one that, obviously you can have, larger scale maps, but this is the one to start with. And there's so much off in this area and off this map. It's really exciting. And just like you, there are volunteers in Bluff, no federal visitor center, but there is a Bears Ears education center called the Beak, and there are volunteers there, and they're open and doing great. So high water tables from fall aquifers in the Paleo era made hunting easier. Springs came out of sandstone seeps. These were Clovis hunters with an interesting spear technology. A Clovis point could be almost 6 inches. We found a few of those in San Juan County, Utah, including one that was broken. So they're hunting megafauna, and they're hunting mammoths, big ground sloths. In one place along the San Juan River, a stretch of cliff has been an artist's canvas for thousands of years. The site offers an abundance of rock art styles and anthropomorphs carved into stone, facing south towards the flowing river and migrating geese, turkeys crossing the sandbars, bears following the turkeys, and just an amazing stretch of rock art, including this mammoth, and the scientific name is Mammoth columbi, a Columbian mammoth. It takes a long time to find a mammoth. I went looking for this mammoth, 10, 15 years ago, and the Russian olive and the tamarisk, it was so thick, I was probably within, feet of it and just couldn't see it. It was way too thick. And the BLM, 8 years ago, decided to use equipment and clear out the underbrush. And I was there a week later, and there were very upset skunks, which my dog found. Huge beehive. There was a beehive almost as big as this shade, and I'm sure a very unhappy bear because I was exposed. And so it's been a long process to open this area up to the public, because first you had to see it. And once you started to see it, it's just an amazing amount of rock art in a very short set of walking distance. French Paleolithic rock art expert Jean Clotz believes that if the petroglyph, quote, had been discovered in a French or Spanish cave, no one would question its identification. So pretty interesting. Paleo-Indian hunting parties after the extinction of the large megafauna concentrated on bison, and so they were there. A lot of these original plants are there. Old Man Cave below Cedar Mesa and on the west side of Comb Wash included the remnants of an early archaic sandal from approximately 7,800 years old. So guys, don't let your wife throw out your sandals. You know, they're gonna be valuable at some point. Right? The green mask site in Grand Gulch may be early archaic. Late archaic peoples used hunting nets of yucca fiber and human hair. They organized communal hunts and rabbit drives, and they had their own distinctive rock art. Archaic period hunter-gatherer rock art along the San Juan River is thousands of years old. And the type that I really like is called Glen Canyon linear. So 1963, the dam is built at Glen Canyon near Page, Arizona. The river's stoppered, water starts to go up. But before that, there was a rush to understand the archaeology, and that included Florence Lister and her husband Robert. So they were out there, you know, helping. But one of the things that was discovered and named is a unique rock art style called Glen Canyon linear. Linear meaning long. And these figures are really interesting. They look like, I don't know, they've got antennae and they're long and thin. And all of the Glen Canyon linear animals are like a little kid who makes sure to, you know, cover the insides. So it's not just a outside shape. There's hatch marks and lines in, you know, in what would be the chest of an elk or bighorn sheep. Glen Canyon linear is just really interesting, and the faces are there. They don't seem to have a lot of weapons. They're with a lot of animals. So that rock art type gets named and, quote, discovered in Glen Canyon. But those people move through the river systems, and some of that rock art is there in Bears Ears, especially along the San Juan River. Most of the rock art, though, is Basketmaker. So we go from Paleo Indians to basket makers, and they're going to start to farm. So they're going to have corn is going to move out of Mexico. Eventually there will be corn, beans, and squash. And those images are amazing. So those are warriors, but there's no bows and arrows yet. So they're using atlatls, spear throwers. So when we think of a spear, we normally think of a big spear point and a stick, and the spear point's on the stick, and you crank your arm back and you throw it. No. There was a much more efficient way to do it with a spear thrower, where yes, you've got a wooden platform, but on that platform, you've got a shaft and a spear point, and by being able to go like this, you actually really increase your thrust, and bam, you can penetrate the hide of something pretty big. So that was Basketmaker, and there are a lot of atlatl images, and then there are images of guys throwing atlatls at each other. And if you did it right and you had a shield to stop an incoming atlatl, then you could pick it up and send it back at the guy that tried to hit you. And there are images of that. So Basketmaker rock art is probably the most common in Bears Ears. So Basketmaker, say 500, 700, 800 AD, starting to farm. So they're staying put. And they're in pit houses. And so we have a house in Bluff, Utah. Bluff, Utah has 260 people that live there, and estimates are 1,000 years ago there could have been 2,000 people in the same space. And so these pit house villages are sort of everywhere. San Juan County, Utah, by the way, is about 7,200 square miles. It's 92% public, federal, state, or tribal land. So only 8% of San Juan County, Utah is private property. And what I love, in 7,200 square miles, there's 2 stoplights. So you guys are really civilized here in Pagosa. Man, you've got, what, 8 stoplights or 10? and 2 stoplights, but only one is a 4-way stop, the other one blinks. So 1 stoplight in a county that big. So the prehistoric presence is real and it's there, and you just have to go hike and look around. And Bearsers, allows you to do that. What I love are the animal representations in rock art. And photographer Diane Orr, rock art photographer, says, the animals are fairly representational, but the artists, this is Glen Canyon Linear, added lines or cross-hatching. Their sheep and deer are elegant, but there is a layer of abstraction with linear lines that she really likes. The other thing they did is, so 5,000 years ago, they would take fresh willow, cut it, trim it, fold it, and make their own little bighorn sheep, almost like the size of my hand. And these have been found in the Grand Canyon in different places at 5,000 years old. So if you're really sharp and you're a Grand Canyon river guide and you want a big tip, you still make little willow bighorn sheep, and you give them to the right clients and you get a bigger tip. So that's a cultural tradition that is still ongoing. And these figurines were ingeniously constructed of a single long, thin willow branch, split down the middle, bent and folded in such a way as to create a miniature representation of an animal, wrote Alan Schrodel. Quote, these figurines were probably magical religious objects that were used in ritual activities to ensure success in hunting game animals. Some of the figurines have even been found ritually killed, pierced by tiny little spears. So that's another thing to look at. Who knows the work of Ed Abbey?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, here's what Abbey had to say about archaic rock art in southeast Utah. Quote, human-like forms with helmets and goggles wave tentacles at us. What can they be? Gods, goddesses, cosmonauts from the Betelgeuse neighborhood? But still we ask, what does the rock art mean? Unlike the story of the cliff ruins, fairly coherent to archaeologists, we know little of the significance of this ancient work. Perhaps meaning is not of primary importance here. What is important is the recognition of art, wherever we may discover it, in whatever form. So that little introduction to rock art, and then of course, the modern, we've gone from Basketmaker to Ancestral Puebloans. The Basketmaker sequence is 1, 2, 3, and then the Ancestral Puebloans, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. And by the time you're at Ancestral Puebloan 4, those folks are meeting the Spanish. So you have these sequences of cultural traits going from the atlatl spears to bows and arrows, and going from baskets to clay and ceramics. And clay and ceramics are so important, and they would have been there at Chimney Rock. So you have, I agree, the most famous Chacoan outlier. And when you think of what it took to build the site up on top, to maintain it, to have all the pilgrims come, that takes food. And to understand how food was processed, corn, beans, and squash, but also how it was cooked. If you're cooking corn in a basket, it's not very efficient. If you're cooking corn in a pot, the kind of pot you want is corrugated, not smooth. That gets figured out. So think about this. When you're cold, what does your skin do when you're cold? Yeah, goosebumps. And then what happens when you warm up? They go away. Well, so there's a heat transfer there. There's an energy quotient. So if you've got a rougher corrugated surface, you can heat that surface faster than a smooth surface. So you're getting about a 10, 12, maybe 14% more energy efficient use out of firewood, the simple invention of a corrugated pot with little dimples made by a woman's fingernails, maybe a little wooden paddle of some sort, changes the world. Because with corrugated pottery and that level of efficiency, it's not only less wood, it's better nutrition from the corn, beans, and squash, and there will be a baby boom. There will be babies will live longer, people will have better nutrition. So that is obviously a double-edged sword, because you're gonna have more people, they're gonna live longer, but you've still got a limited amount of farmland. So that's something, when you think about Chimney Rock and you think about the ceramics there, think about that difference between a smooth pot and a corrugated pot, and what that really meant. So here's a quote from Florence Lister, and remember on a map it's going to say Cedar Mesa, and on a map, the old maps, and I'll show you some images, the old maps say ears of the bear, so bear's ears in Spanish. So that was a name used for a long, long time. But the area is also known as Cedar Mesa, up from the river. Here's Florence Lister, quote, "Cedar Mesa is a place of untrammeled natural beauty whose remoteness has secured a prehistoric microcosm from large-scale ravages of modern exploitation. The Cedar Mesa landscape is much like that of Mesa Verde. It was a major staging area for those at the dawn of Puebloan history." Yeah. So you've got Ancestral Puebloans at Chimney Rock, and they're not going to stay in the same place. They're going to move. Everything happens when Chaco falls. My buddy Steve Lexton says the fall of Chaco by 1150 AD is the single most important event in the Southwest in 5,000 years. So then there are Chacoan refugees, and there will be Mesa Verdean refugees, and people will leave Chimney Rock. Well, they will go west. They will go to Bears Ears. So that's important. And so yes, there are cycles of abandonment, but people don't disappear, they just move. I teach at Fort Lewis College. We are honored. We have free tuition for Native American students, paid for by Colorado taxpayers. It's part of our original relationship. We've got 6,600 acres of what was federal land, the original fort. Now it's state land, and we have a sacred trust to educate Native American students, and we do. And I've got really interesting kids this semester, including a Hopi kid who's a lot of fun. And so it's fun talking to them and learning from them. And I'm going to use a word tonight that he told me before, but I finally asked him to spell it. And it's a very important word, and I had no idea. So I'm going to give you a 2,000-year-old word and explain why it's still being used. So think about that movement. Think about that migration. Chimney Rock, Mesa Verde, Chaco, they're all the same people, but they're moving through the landscape. And a friend of mine got his PhD at the University of Arizona, has done a really interesting study just on Chacoan sandal types. And he studied all the rock art sites in Bears Ears and looking for sandals, just sandals carved on the rock. So we've had fun sharing rock art sites. And he says, and I guess he's right, he got his PhD, that when Chaco is abandoned in 1300 AD, as the Chacoan refugees spread out, they wanted to maintain their high status, and they did it with their feet. They did it with their sandals. So there was a unique kind of sandal design from Chaco that was supposed to give you high status, like $300 pair of Nikes Only now you're in Bears Ears, but everybody knows you're from Chaco because of your sandals. How cool is that? And that's part of why national monuments are so important for the science, for the research, for the answers to questions we haven't even asked yet. They're there, and they're on the ground. Maize arrives north from Mexico, brought up by long-distance traders. After AD 900, scarlet macaws or parrots and their feathers were traded to Basketmaker villages in the Bears Ears area along the San Juan River, Butler Wash, Comb Wash, and Cedar Mesa. Copper bells came later. Parrots. Parrots. The most valuable trade item 1,000 years ago were feathers. Not gold. Feathers. From a macaw, a scarlet macaw that lives in equatorial Mexico and eats fruit. Well, there's no, the same fruit trees aren't going to exist in the desert. Paquime at Casas Grande becomes a parrot, used parrot trade center. Who's been to the Edge of the Cedars Museum in Blanding? To the second floor. Yeah. There is an absolute one-of-a-kind scarlet macaw sash made out of these parrot feathers with inside it. So the sash has the squirrel's extinct too, but a squirrel sort of leather band, and then the sash, and inside the red feathers are a blue feather. There was a blue macaw that sort of looks like a thunderbird. This was found in a cave in Bears Ears in 1957. And one of the things I like to talk to my students about, that when everyone leaves and when all these people are moving around, I think there are rituals of abandonment. And where that was found and where blankets have been found, I think they were strategically put there. And we know that the Ancestral Puebloan descendants came back because on one group of them are Hopis, and then Hopi pottery is found at these prehistoric sites, but it's historic Hopi pottery. So Hopis are coming back to visit. There are 4 Ancestral Puebloan blankets in the world. One of them is on our campus. And all you got to do is call the Center of Southwest Studies, make an appointment. It's in the basement, and it's in mint condition. So it's male weaving, white cotton, and it's so perfect that we even know how it was folded, and we fold it that way. The only other one in the area that's really worth seeing is in Telluride. That is, again, an Ancestral Puebloan blanket, but it's the only one in the world that's dyed, that's colored. There may be blood on it. They were going to do some tests, and I'm not sure, whatever happened to that, but blankets are pretty amazing, and they were here. So there is this culture, material culture that's out there, blankets, pots. When I was writing this part of the book, quote, "As I write this, I turn my head to see a small clay pot, and I study the brilliant red and blue colored corn cobs given to me by one of my former students, Georgie Poniespa from Hopi, who during a cultural heritage internship learned from her elders how to plant and harvest corn. I treasure these cobs with their multiple colored hues, every color except yellow. The genetics of this corn go back thousands of years, perhaps even to the first small maize cobs that the archaic predecessors of the more settled basketmakers planted in the San Juan Valley." It was pretty funny. Georgie came to me and wanted to do public history and historic preservation and said, "I'd like to do an internship at Hopi planting corn." And I said, "This is a history class. You can't plant corn." And then I went home and I thought, what an idiot. How dumb can I be? They've been planting corn for 3,000, 4,000 years. Of course she should do that. Well, she is a beautiful Hopi girl, and the Hopi elder women beat her up. I mean, they smacked her with sticks and they roughed her up. They wanted to make sure she was serious. And when they found out, they taught her everything. And she is now the Native American Graves Protection Act coordinator for Hopi. And she traces her success back home with that summer planting corn, learning how to do it, digging the holes for the kernels, and yeah, so that was a real moving event for both of us. Women helped roof the structures. Think about that. Think about your structures up on top of Chimney Rock. They had roofs. That was women's work. Men brought the materials, but because it was sort of a weaving-like thing, apparently women did the roof work. So, any of you women, I've got a roof back in Durango, needs a little help, come talk to me. Boys and men dug the pit houses approximately 2.5 feet below grade with an inside bench for sitting and for storage and a central hearth, both for cooking and heating. Women helped roof the structures. Smoke went up through a central hole, and at night, starlight and moonlight shone down on the sleeping families who slept together on the earthen floor, feet to the fire. I had an elder from Zia that I did tours with Mesa Verde with, and he gave me that little detail, and I said, that's interesting. So you're sleeping together, but your feet are to the fire. And I asked him, I said, I got a really difficult question here. When did the Navajos get here? Because Navajo archaeologists are aggressively pushing that date back. And the Pueblo Indians are saying, halt. And Peter was from Zia. And I said, so what's going on? When did the Navajos get here? And as a historian, it's hard for me not to talk about dates. And my native kids could care less about dates. There's no dates. There's history. Native groups have always had historians, but dates are irrelevant. So I said, Peter, when did the Navajos get here? And he gave me the best answer ever, which I still use in class. He said, the Navajos got here the evening before the Spanish. Yeah, it solves the problem. Now I know. So, low intensity dryland farming up on Cedar Mesa. Florence Lister wrote, quote, it is a flat plateau averaging 6,000 to 7,000 feet in elevation, sliced by deep, shear-walled gashes, opening to the south and having no running water except in some of the fissures. It is blanketed with the same aeolian soils deposited by winds whirling out of Monument Valley and a dense pinon juniper forest that merges with taller timber in the uplands. So these are still farmers. But when Chaco falls in 1150, everybody starts moving, then there's conflict. So there was some sort of Pax Chaco. Pax as in the Latin for Pax Roma, peace of Rome, Pax Chaco. There was some sort of peace, some sort of governmental whatever that kept things in check. From 1150 to 1300, that's gone. So you now have the architecture of defense. People are scattered, they're worried about food, they're worried about water, and the architecture is dramatically different. You go to Chaco, go in, national park, get your little parking permit, look at things. I find it fascinating that the American Museum in New York City still refuses to return Chacoan artifacts to Chaco because they say, well, you're not going to keep them very well there. When Park Service built a whole building just to have these items returned, and the American Museum keeps saying, well, you don't have enough, climate control. Well, hey, quit that. Bring the artifacts back. When Chaco is abandoned, where do those people go? they go west. When Chimney Rock is abandoned, what's all this movement? So the cliff dwelling period is that short 150 years, 1150 to 1300. And that's what's so amazing about Bears Ears. So Chaco, you drive in, you look at the sites. Mesa Verde, you drive in, you get your tickets, you look at the sites. Bears Ears, good luck. We're not going to tell you anything. It's dirt. There's no trail markers. There's no signs. Take a hike. Take a dog. Go look. Totally different way to think about the landscape. And it's very successful. Just carry water, put on the sunscreen, don't get lost. It's fabulous because it's not programmed. It's about self-discovery. And it's just a very different way to think about land management. And I hope it stays that way. Bears Ears is one of the few units of any national park, any national monument that has tribal co-management. And the tribes are saying all sorts of things, including, no signs, no little parking areas, park in the dirt, good luck. They want you to travel at your own speed. They want you to discover things, not just be told by a ranger, this is what happened here. So the experience is radically different, and we want to keep it that way. In fact, if somebody makes a little pile of stones, cairns, to get to a site, and I'm feeling a little righteous, and I think there's too many cairns, I admit I am a cairn kicker. And I've been known to go like this, and if that's a little harder for the next person, so what? Just keep looking. You'll figure out how to get there. Grand Gulch in the Bears Ears area has a major archaeological site named Turkey Pen, which included a yacal, good Spanish word, a yacal structure or enclosure made from vertical sticks, brush and mud dried like adobe. And there were turkeys there. Turkeys were everywhere. Turkeys are domesticated by the Ancestral Puebloans. There would have been turkeys at Chimney Rock. But this is what's fascinating. Nobody ate them. They used the turkey eggs. And every family made their own turkey feather blankets. So you didn't trade corn, you didn't trade corn to the blanket maker. You made your own turkey feather blankets. And the last time anybody made a turkey feather blanket was just recently. And I think I've got a picture in the slideshow. She used 11,000 feathers. And we're on, it's not the big feathers, it's the little feathers. And so it's identical to a fleece jacket or a down jacket, the little small turkey feathers. And that's what kept them warm in the winter. These turkey feather blankets that were about, not almost exactly this size, maybe a little smaller. And so that is another fabulous thing that can be, pieces of them can be found, and I've got some images for you. So I just want to end the talk with an experience of mine. Ernie's asked me to talk about pot hunting, and I will, but this is an experience I had in one of those canyons, and this is in the book. The shadows had grown long, and I knew I had to get off the slick rock and out of the canyon soon, or I'd never cross the wash in the proper place. Find my way through the mud and the tangle of tamarisks and up the other side to my truck. The shadows lengthened, impatient and a bit depressed, I descended the canyon. I had been trying to glean some significant sign from the ancient inhabitants. I'd spent a glorious spring afternoon high atop Comb Ridge, Utah, breathing in the wind from far across the Navajo Nation and walking slowly, deliberately to the top of the 65 million year old uplift with Charlie, my black flat-coated retriever mix, He eagerly led the way, tail up, nose down, eyes bright. We had napped close to the top of the comb in sand beneath an aging juniper tree, and I'd seen a few small petroglyphs on the massive sandstone fins. I'd picked up a few pottery sherds and some red chert flakes, which I put down on the ground and covered with a thin layer of dirt. Finding an arrowhead and putting it back, I term, quote, catch and release arrowhead hunting. Why not? It works for trophy trout and gives others the chance to catch them again. I walked without maps, wanting to discover the landscape on my own. The weather had been splendid, the temperature just right, perfect for hiking the comb, but despite looking and searching, scanning the horizon and cliff walls with my small Birders 7.5 power binoculars, I hadn't seen much of consequence. I wanted to find a spectacular sight that would reach out to me across time and space and jolt me into the present, but no luck. I was tired, a little hungry, irritable, and late getting down to the truck. I hadn't gleaned anything from the landscape. And then I saw it. High up, higher than I could reach. My hiking sticks had been clicking down the canyon floor as I moved quickly looking for small barrel cactus tree roots and bends in the trail so I wouldn't trip. The light was gone, and though the air was not yet cool, night was coming. I approached a long, south-facing alcove. Suddenly, for no reason I can remember, I looked above a low Basketmaker wall from more than 1,000 years ago. The Basketmakers had preceded the Ancestral Puebloans, and I looked up, and what I saw rooted me to the spot. My blood pulsed through my upper body. As silence and shadow became darkness, a quick scan up the wall revealed a row of exquisite ochre red handprints. I was not alone. In the canyons and broken terrain of Bears Ears, one frequently hikes in solitude and silence. Hours and even days go by with only the mesmerizing beauty of clouds scuttling above the tops of the Abajo Mountains. The ancient ones, though, are always present and palpable. That day I had found no stunning rock art panels or defensive, difficult to access cliff dwellings. Instead, I walked and hiked and napped, shook off a few sorrows, talked to a few family ghosts, and crossed from one drainage south to another. Hurrying back against the darkness, I had forgotten to look up, but now something compelled me to shift my weight, angle my shoulders, and there, like a message from the old ones, arched the handprints. Magnificent, they spoke as clearly as if an ancestral Puebloan, long dark hair flowing, water dripping from cupped hands, had raised his head from the small pour-off pool I had passed moments ago. I'm staring at the handprints. I had not been stopped by a high cliff dwelling, just these little handprints. That symbol that always means humanity. This is us, we are here. These are our hands. Down canyon, the stars came out one by one. The evening star appeared and then the others shone. When I could no longer see the handprints, I finally started walking more slowly now, at peace. I didn't worry about finding my way to the truck. The old ones had been there. They would always be there. The presence of the handprints in the canyon, their subtlety and intimacy struck me more deeply than if I had stumbled upon an unknown cliff dwelling. Though they had been made 1,000 years ago, the red and white hands, particularly the children's prints, reached across time and space to my heart. I came out of the canyon into a brilliant rising moon. I was flush with warmth and affection for a people who had left their telltale sign in such careful, colorful patterns. I was humbled and grateful. My dog and I stepped off the steep bank into the mud and tamarisks as moonlight glinted on my truck's windshield above us and through the trees. Then I understood the wisdom of the old ones. I stopped again and smiled. I had come down through the canyon too fast, in too much of a hurry, caught up in all the modern pettiness and busyness that burdens our lives. Had I not paused to study the handprints, I would have hit the arroyo in the deepest dark with no moon and stars to guide me. Despite my canine companion, we probably would have gotten lost. But now with the moon on my windshield, I had found my truck on the arroyo's opposite bank. What had drawn me to that alcove precisely when I needed to slow down and wait for the rising moon? What had made me look up at that exact moment? I'll never know. But in Bears Ears, as across the Southwest, there are always secrets in the landscape, silent signs from those who went before. There are messages from the past to the present, and stories on stone. All right, let me get the images. What do we need to do here? So this is what the Bears Ears look like.
And where's that picture taken from?
That picture's taken, there was a little bit of asphalt there.
Right.
That picture's taken from the entrance to Natural Bridges.
Okay.
So Natural Bridges is a Park Service National Monument right next to Bears Ears. Fabulous place to hike. Only 6 campsites, but fabulous place to hike. And I prefer the Owachimo Bridge Trail. So you start at the top, you go down, and the trail goes to the left or to the south. Go right.
The problem is you can't take your dogs in there because it's a park.
You know,
I do know.
I haven't been caught that there.
There's nobody out there, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's very-
I can move faster than some of the rangers. But anyway, when you go down there and the trail goes left, go right.
Okay.
And there's a pretty interesting site. This is Bears Ears from the top. And this looks just like Pagosa. It's cool. So the bottom of Bears Ears is canyons and hot, but along about July, this is fabulous. So this is up at 7,000 feet. Tribal people certainly gathered here, and today, in the present, there are modern tribal events up here in the summer that are really good culture camps. This is the top of Combe Ridge. It's about an 800-foot drop off on that far side. The first time I did that with a different dog, I had a Springador, a Springer Spaniel Labrador. He was great, he was loyal, he just wasn't smart. And he ran past me and I thought, oh my God, he's going over the edge. And he got right to the edge and the updraft coming up just took his long ears and put him straight out. And he stopped and looked around and I thought, oh, thank you. He's in the book. Peter Pino, the fellow I worked with, a real honor to work with Peter for years at Mesa Verde.
What Pueblo is it?
Zia, former governor from Zia. So that's the mammoth. That's the bison antiquus. One of the distinctive characteristics, the top knot, and then the spreading. It's there.
And you said that's on the Sand Island panel?
It's there.
Yeah.
Right now, there's no interpretive signs. I'm not sure it's a good idea to just say, hey, that's there. We'll see what the BLM does. But if you know where to look, and the best light is, I say, the equinoxes for some reason. So in Bluff, we get carried away. We like mammoths. And for a number of years before COVID, we had our little sort of alternative to Burning Man. So why go all the way to Nevada and get naked and take drugs? And, we just didn't think we needed to do that. But we would have a December 21st solstice event. And this one got really involved. This one got totally pagan because when it came time to burn this, we did it with flaming atlatl darts. That was pretty exciting to set this guy on fire. This is the split twig figurines. These have been found at 5,000 years old with tiny little spears next to them. This is Glen Canyon linear. So you see what I mean? They're long figures, pretty interesting. You know, they're not a body shape we would consider a body, but that's the fascinating thing about rock art is there's human images, and that's what they thought they looked like or what they wanted to look like. So I don't know if these folks were all on a diet or what, but it's a really interesting rock art type. The most interesting is Barrier Canyon. And I don't have any Barrier Canyon images in this slideshow, but Barrier Canyon is phenomenal. And a buddy is one of the experts on Barrier Canyon. When they started the research, they thought they'd find 100. They're up to 350. And those people, wow, it's paint. It's not petroglyphs, it's paint, and that paint is still there. And they were able to take a yucca fiber brush, the hair of a yucca fiber brush, and date it to 9,000 years. Chaco. So this is your sort of mothership for Chimney Rock. This is an image on the cover of my book. And yes, there is a way to get up there, but the last 30 feet here are a little dicey. So it's easier to get up than to get out. So be prepared that climbing out of that is more complicated. So what I love about Bears Ears is that you have to look, you have to hike, but then you see things that are much smaller scale than Chaco or Mesa Verde. And it's what I love about Chimney Rock, is that the scale of it totally fits those two rocks. This site, the BLM didn't know existed. I got to name it. First I wanted to name it after my dog, and I thought, no, I can't do that. So I named it Sunset House because it faces west. It would have been unbearably hot up there. But this is what's called a refuge site. This is a place where you went when there were enemies, when you could be kidnapped. This is where you went and hid. And today I asked my Hopi student, he'd mentioned this in class, and I said, give me that word again. And I wrote it down so I could remember it. It's Wali, W-A-L-I, accent, Waliki. It's a 2,000-year-old word that means refuge site. And here's how important that word is. That word is still used by Hopis. It still has the same meaning as it did 1,000 years ago. Go to that place and hide. And the last time they really needed to use that word was to keep kids from being kidnapped and taken to boarding school. And nobody fully understands this, but Hopi parents were so uninterested in the larger American culture that 11 Hopi fathers refused to send their kids to boarding school and were imprisoned at Alcatraz for a period of time. So the fact that the word is still there, the site, Hopis don't use these sites anymore, but they have the word, go hide.
Say the word one more time.
Walaki. And they would do Walaki. That was a day, finding that. It's called a Christmas tree point. It's a archaic spear point. One of my neighbors and a person I really like to hike with is formidable. She was the first armed female BLM ranger. And whether she carries a gun all the time, I'm not sure, but I know she carries a crime investigating kit. Because when I found this, she whipped it out and measured it, and we photographed it, we reburied it. She's since gone back and found it. But Linnell is a very interesting person, and my wife coined the phrase that Linnell, quote, broke the sagebrush ceiling because when she became the first female BLM cop, BLM had no women, much less armed rangers. And she has stories that are just amazing. One of the most fun ones is the BLM hadn't figured out what was appropriate clothing for a female in the office, going to be a cop. And so the first go around was a slinky sort of polyester airline stewardess's single dress with a short skirt. And she said, do you know how hard it is to pull your .357 out of a shoulder holster because the whole skirt comes up as you're trying to get your gun out? It just didn't work. And apparently somewhere there's photographs of her modeling this thing and what it took to let the BLM, to get the BLM to let women wear pants and a regular top.
Was that made out of flint?
It's a
Does it
kind of a
look
chert. It's a chert.
A church?
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's what I mean. Dueling Atlatl guys. Why they're wearing bighorn sheep on their head, I have no idea. But even though I'm a photographer and I love photographs, rock art where an artist can sort of take the rock out is fabulous. And I love, a black and white image of rock art that just boom makes the image pop out. Handprints. So a positive handprint, you've got red clay, yellow, sometimes a little green, and you put the clay in your hand and you put it on the rock. This is a negative handprint where the paint is in your mouth. You've got like a little piece of bamboo, some kind of thing you spit through, you spit the paint out. So the paint, your hand is on the rock. You spit the paint out, and that's what you get. And to me, it looks like the hand is coming out of the rock. I really love negative handprints. This is the cover from another book of mine called Outdoors in the Southwest, an Adventure Anthology. Very famous rock art panel. This is called the Procession Panel. A friend stitched this together from other photographs. There's 104 images of people coming to this big party. This is a kiva, a big kiva, a great kiva, probably up, definitely in Bears Ears, probably up Comb Wash. These are atlatls. This is really worth the hike and then studying that. That's what the canyons look like. And so trying to find water, trying to move through this landscape, pretty complicated. This is a day I will never forget. So this is a long lens. We saw this site. We tried to figure out how to get there. We start, and I realized, I wasn't sure how hard the trail was going to be. And then I realized, there is no trail. Nobody's been here in decades. And we were going to attempt to get all the way to here. Well, the cliff ledge disappears and you've got to crawl. And not only do you have to crawl, but this part of the ledge tilts out and it's a 600-foot drop. And that was quite a day. I tied off my springador, and he was very upset that I tied him off. And when I finally got back from this and I untied him, he swore he would never leave me again, and he didn't. But I promised my wife I would never go anywhere my dog couldn't go. But I just didn't tell her that he had 4-paw drive and could go anywhere. So
what would have been the access for the people there?
same thing. So this is what I mean about defensive architecture. A fabulous book is called The Cliff Dwellings Speak. Friends of mine helped write and produce that. So this is what's called a barrier to entry. So right there, to even get there, somebody could stand behind that wall with a bow and arrow and prevent you from getting there. The first map of the area and the first words, Moki, word sort of meant Hopi. One of the really important Navajos, his name was Wolf Killer, and he dictates his history to Louisa Wetherill, who's fluent in Navajo, and that book finally got published about a decade ago. One of the Navajo shaman or medicine men, this was an original Curtis print that I donated to the college. This is Hashkanini, the famous shaman in Monument Valley. Here's Louisa Wetherill. Her nickname was Slim Woman, and she was so fluent in Navajo that Hashkanini thought she was like a lost granddaughter. And he trusts her so much that he designates her as his executor. So when he passes away, she has to figure out how to divide his belongings. She does that. Night comes, she's in the trading post. She wakes up at dawn the next day to this incredible sound. She can't figure out what it is. The sun's not up. And she realizes it's women crying and keening and just moaning. She steps outside, and the trading post is surrounded by 24 Ute women. And I had to go through the family archives to make sure I got that number right. 24 Ute women who were slave wives of Hashkanini, and he hadn't told her he was giving them to her. So she wakes up with 24 new dependents that she didn't have when she went to bed. So now she's got to find more sheep, build a couple of hogans. And that's 1910. That's how remote Monument Valley was, and the custom's still going on. So at Bears Ears, you can still find Navajo sweat lodges and hogans. Not many. Cattle have knocked them down, but there are some. Hesperus, one of the four sacred Navajo mountains. It's fascinating to go from here to Farmington and then go kind of south-southeast into the Gobernador, and that's where the Navajo culture begins. So whoever the peoples were who came out of the Arctic, came down from Alaska, came down along the Continental Divide, they become Navajos in Gobernador. It's the cultural hearth. The songs, the dances, the ceremonies begin here. So there's this really interesting mix of Pueblo and sort of Navajo architecture in Gobernador, and lots of oil and gas. So finding these sites is a little complicated, but it can be done.
What's the name of the site, do you know?
That's Francis Canyon, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hey, Francis, okay.
Yeah. So the rock art in Bluff is a true palimpsest. I love that word. So palimpsest is an image on top of an image. And so here you've got Navajo horses on top of Ancestral Puebloan spirals. This is a site, again, close to the river. One of the original Mormon scouts gets lost, has to spend the night here, and carves his name and the date because he thinks he's going to starve to death, so he wants somebody to find at least his inscription. One of the first Mormon elders in Bluff. Some of the stone houses that they built once they started ranching.
Now, you know why Bluff is where it's at and who founded it?
Yes, yeah, it's founded by the Hole in the Rockers,
Right.
who were on their way to Montezuma Creek and they gave up.
Right.
And I'm really glad they did.
This is good enough.
So I'm going to end with this image, but it's a great story. So this is on Combe Ridge. It's about twilight, as you can see. There's a campground there, this Combe Wash campground. And this site, to the Mormons, who, you know, were through the area and are still there in Blanding and Monticello, they called it Queen Highland Mary because a lot of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saint elders were Scottish. And the church was actively recruiting tradesmen with skills, masons and carpenters and so forth. And so they called it Highland Mary. What I love about the multicultural aspect of Bears Ears is everybody knows the area. It's got different names. The Navajos, historically hunting bighorn sheep up there, near those rocks, got a really big bighorn ram. So the Navajo name for the same set of rocks is Big Sheep's Balls. So, two different cultures, same rock outcropping, very different names. All right, well, thank you very much.
Handprints. I can't recall if I've seen photographs or in actual life, but sometimes you get 6-fingered
Yes.
hands. What's
Yes.
the story with that?
Well, first you need to read Tony Hillerman's A Thief of Time, because it's in there. So it is a, you know, genetic abnormality which had deep power. And I know of at least one set of rock art where there is a 6-fingered image. And it was just, you know, one of the problems with these little villages is the interbreeding. And so you would get, you know, that as a genetic abnormality. And so to prevent that interbreeding, who shows up to provide new gene material? Kokopelli. Right. So that is the flute player with the pack. So he looks like a humpback flute player. That's his backpack. And there are so many great Kokopelli images in Bears Ears. And there are Kokopellis lying on their back, playing these flutes in this, you know, totally, you know, I mean, they are maxed out like they've got a saxophone and they're just letting loose. And so those were the traders who brought, you know, the corn, beans, and squash seeds. They would have taken turquoise back into Mexico. The pochteca is the Aztec word. And so that was to try and prevent those sort of abnormalities, you know, birth defects, so forth. Yeah.
Yeah, I was really interested in the fact that the petroglyphs had the multiple, you said, people fighting each other.
Mm-hmm.
So now comes the question, was this part of the suspected Fremont people and the Ancestral Puebloans?
It's a great question. So as a historian, I love to teach the idea of the frontier.
Yeah.
And so, you know, once upon a time, Pagosa was the edge of the frontier. Frontier kept moving west. But what I love to think about when I think about the frontier, and what I teach my students is, when you're on the frontier, when you're on the edge, are you more liberal or more conservative? Are you more interested in the old ways and maintaining them, or are you more innovative? You know, what difference does it make? And that's why Bears Ears is so fascinating, is because it really bumps up on the Fremont culture. So the Fremont culture is right there at Canyonlands, right there on the north side of the Colorado River. So in Bears Ears, you have the Ancestral Puebloan world, later Navajos and Utes, washing up against the Fremont. And the Fremont were very different people. No sandals, moccasins. They wore moccasins. And they wore moccasins with, and to think about your dogs, the dew claw, right? On the paw of your dog. Only on a Fremont moccasin, it's the dew claw of a mountain lion.
Huh.
So in my book, I've got a photograph of a moccasin made out of a mountain lion hide that would have been Fremont. So great question as to what's going on. And that's, I think, also this sort of idea of leaving artifacts, leaving things as you depart.
So is that like 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago?
That's 1300.
1,300, okay.
Yeah. So,
Just a quick, is the entirety of Bears Ears within San Juan County?
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
It's fun to imagine that if the Chacoan people were at Chimney Rock, that the hot springs right here in this town would have been something they probably would have come to. Would this have been the farthest east, or do you have any way of knowing how far east possibly the Chacoan culture went?
That's one of the great things about Chimney Rock is I think it is the northeast boundary of the San Juan cultural world, and Bears Ears is the northwest boundary. And so this fabulous blanket in Telluride, in the Telluride Museum, comes out of that area of Bears Ears, right on the boundary with the Fremont people. So yeah, what they thought about hot springs, good question.
Probably was a place that they would come.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yes.
That was my question. Where was the blanket found that's at Fort Lewis?
The blanket found at Fort Lewis came out of a cave north of Winslow, Arizona. And, you know, it's a cotton weave.
How did Fort Lewis get to keep it?
25 years ago, I came to direct the Center of Southwest Studies. And one of the things I did was accept a $3.5 million gift. So 25 years ago, that was a lot of money. And that gift is that blanket, absolutely original historic Navajo blankets, Pueblo weavings, and then Hispanic serapes, traditional historic Hispanic serapes. And we trademarked the name, so it's called the Durango Collection. And then I wasn't able to accomplish this, but a subsequent director, we were able to take 3 of those original blankets and get Pendleton to make them. So we've got the $50,000 Navajo blanket. You can buy the $300 bedspread and have the same pattern. And so somehow it wound up on the market, and we wanted to make sure that it went into a public collection.
Called the Durango?
The Durango Collection, yeah. Yes.
Do you think they grew cotton up here, or do you think they traded for it somewhere?
This is too far north,
Do you think
but
they-
around Winslow, Arizona, would have been hot enough that they would have, Hopi ancestors would have grown cotton. So, all right, well, come on, see me. I've got some books if anybody's interested. I don't have a lot of them, but I've got Bears Ears books and 2 books on the sheep in the area, and then a couple books on Aldo Leopold and his land ethic in New Mexico. So, thank you.
All right, folks, thanks for coming, and don't forget the donation jar, please.